It's important we look at the facts.
Why? Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Planet Holyrood, where we're going to try and untangle the murky world of Scottish politics and hopefully entertain you along the way. So I'm Hannah Rodger, the chief reporter at the Sunday Mail, and I'm going to be doing my best to stand in for Paul Hutchin while he's off gallivanting. But I'm not alone, so I'm joined today by Anna Burnside, who's the chief writer at the Daily Record, and Douglas Dickie, who's the content editor at the Scottish Daily Express. Hello, welcome.
Greetings.
Hi there.
How are we all?
Well, I'm fine, but Paul Hutchin was messaging me on Wednesday when I was at the COVID inquiry, Tuesday when I was at the COVID inquiry, and he was in a spa, so that was nice.
Yeah. Well,
thanks, Paul.
Yeah, we're not all so lucky. Anyway, I think, let's start off. It was obviously there's quite a lot to kind of talk about in terms of Scottish politics this week. I thought maybe Anna, seeing as you were at the Scottish COVID inquiry, you can maybe start off by telling us a little bit about, about what you sort of experienced there, and also, if we think there's a need really to have this separate Scottish one, given that there's a UK-wide one happening, or what you think, will be the benefit of it.
Well, from the people that I spoke to, I think they definitely. So it was the first phase of the inquiry is looking at the people who were affected by COVID. The Scottish inquiry is going in the other way around from the UK one, in that they're starting with people and their individual stories and then moving on to process and decision making. So it was really people front and centre for the first. It's going to be people front and centre for the first phase. And I spoke to just a few families and bereaved on Tuesday, and they're very, very much needing a Scottish inquiry. Some of the people I spoke to have also been down to London and involved in the UK inquiry, but the scale of that means that their stories are not going to be front and centre. And with so much, obviously, health and devolved matter, so many decisions made in Scotland were different from decisions in London. I do think we need that. I think there's obviously a lot of questions people want answered, and just a lot of people just need to tell their stories with the bit of distance we now have. And, I was quite impressed and humbled even by people being prepared to go through it all again, relive it. Very, very difficult, reliving these ghastly, traumatic experiences, but they are so convinced that the only way that anything like this could have a hope of being handled better in the future is to have the kind of granular detail that they can supply, and to learn lessons from that. So I think it got off to I think it got off to as good a start as it could. The actual arrangements for it are I have to say, quite annoying. The actual hearing is in a room in George Street, and the families and so on who want to watch it are watching it from a screening room 10 minutes walk away in kind of serviced offices in Princes Street. So actually it was quite a COVID-y setup in that you were watching it through a screen. The press room, the journalists weren't in the room with the inquiry. We were also in a separate room in this weird serviced office block 10 minutes walk away. So that was in itself a strange flashback to COVID, to experiencing things through a screen. So I don't think these arrangements are ideal, but the building, they were going to have it in the old GPO where they had the trams inquiries being done up. So apparently in a city the size of Edinburgh, they didn't find somewhere that fit everyone in. So that's why that was quite annoying. But I mean, that's a procedural thing, that's not the meat and drink of it. I thought it got off to as good a start as it probably could.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, for anyone, I think just reliving any part of the pandemic is pretty horrific. I kind of struggle to watch things, dramatizations or discussions about the pandemic, and I just get very, very frustrated. And so I can only imagine what it'd be like for those families who are having to go, and potentially, I mean, I presume as well, these families, if they are involved in both inquiries, they might be having to give evidence twice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very, very challenging, but yeah, we'll see.
And just even if they're not giving evidence, just being back in that room, sitting through, listening to all these stories, you're right back in it. I was right back in it. It unbelievably tough for them, and I was really, really impressed by their grit and the fact that they weren't angry. That no one that I saw had brought a pitchfork with them. They weren't angry. They were they had a really mature and actually generous attitude. They were there for all the right reasons. And I thought, well, let's hope that tone continues. It'd be nice to see the politicians having a similarly mature and positive approach to it.
Yeah, well, we can only hope. I think one of the other things that kind of stuck out to me this week was, I don't know, Dickie, if you saw this, the David Tideman, who's the chief executive at Ferguson Marine. He was speaking in Holyrood, and he revealed some interesting information about the price of the Ferries contract, which I feel like, it can't get any worse. But do you want to tell us maybe a bit more about what he said, if you're...
Yeah, sure. So obviously this is the Glen Sannox and the Glen Rosa, I think is the other one, which were supposed to have been on the water by now at a cost of £97 million. But Mr. Tideman was in Parliament this week to inform us that the actual cost is going to be £360 million at the moment. £35 million spent on redesigns alone. We're now at the stage where, I don't think anyone is going to think that the cost is going to finish at 360 million. So we're in a situation where conceivably we could be spending double the amount on these two ferries than Alex Salmond said we would spend on setting up an entire independent state in 2014. So I mean, I think it's such a stark contrast there that it's just an outrageous situation, Hannah. And we've obviously discussed this before. This isn't the first time we brought it up. No one's been taken to task on it. That photo call in 2017 with the painted on windows is kind of come to epitomise the SNP government. And of course, we then found out this week that Humza Yousaf was desperate to get involved in that, which I think sums up Humza Yousaf's luck at times.
I think one of the things that was interesting as well that came out this week is not only is it going to cost, I think they said it could cost up to 400 million, but the fact that the market value of these vessels is only 70 million pounds.
Yeah.
And there was also some talk of, I think I read somebody had said, the design of these vessels is more complex than for designs for warships. I mean, Anna, what is going on here? Why is this being mishandled so badly? Is it just a case that all governments struggle with these big infrastructure projects, or is it a unique, do we have a uniquely incompetent case here?
I think it's really a really good example of political hubris, isn't it? I mean, Alex Salmond's hubris, and that he wanted to be the leader, the SNP leader of a country that had its own shipbuilding industry and could build its own ferries and could fill this contract. And, that was the kind of country that he wanted us to be. And so there was the sweetheart deal to get this deal through. And what we've been landed with is ships that are only going to be worth 70 million and are going to leave the taxpayer with this massive, huge deficit. I mean, the ins and outs of ferry design are not Anna's specialist subject. I don't know if there anyone here's specialist subject, but I am completely ready to believe that it's a very complicated thing to design, that it's more complicated than a warship does seem a stretch. But I don't feel qualified to make a decision on that. But it does sound as if during lockdown, they were looking at plans on Zoom, and nobody was. It just sounds like a absolute mess and catalogue of disasters from start to finish. But to me, the important thing is, well, why did we embark on this? And that's my kind of takeaway from it, is it was wildly overambitious from the start.
So would you agree with that, Dickie, that it was just too ambitious from the beginning and it was kind of almost designed to fail, or do you think?
I don't think it should be too ambitious to build a couple of ferries. And again, like Anna, I'm not going to, claim that I've any great knowledge on shipbuilding. Make it float is about the extent of my knowledge, but obviously the island communities
don't paint on the windows. That might be
a
suggestion.
Especially when the scenery is so beautiful, you want to be able to look out the windows, instead of a black bit of paint. But I think the island communities, the CalMac stock is old, it's aging. I went to Rossi a few years ago, and I'm pretty sure it was the same ship that I used to go on when I went on holiday when I was 5. It needed to be done. We need these boats, but we need to make it worthwhile to the taxpayer. The island communities deserve these boats. We've already spoke about how badly they're struggling. There needs to be some sort of inquiry into this. We need to know why this has happened, how this has happened. Obviously, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. So we need to make sure that, because we are going to need to do this in the future, we are going to need new ferries soon. So we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And people need to be held. I think what gets the public's goat so much about this is that people don't seem to be being held responsible for it. It's just, there was design issues. It just seems to get passed off. And you've got a lot of people. I remember, was it Pete Wishart was moaning that this kept getting brought up in Holyrood, as if it was like, how dare we question, this horrific waste, or what appears to be a horrific waste of public money. We're getting close to a bill, again, similar to the Scottish Parliament building, which was obviously such a massive scandal. We need answers to this. The public needs answers, deserves answers, and I think we actually need to get them.
Yeah, I think the idea of a public inquiry is interesting, but also, I feel like Scotland is just becoming like public inquiry central at the minute, and these things are also hugely expensive. They take a very, very long time. I mean, that Edinburgh Trams inquiry, you guys might have more information than me, but that took forever, and I don't know, the findings were only published recently. Is that true, or have they not been published yet?
Yep, no, I think that's correct.
So we've got that. We've got obviously the COVID inquiry, hugely important. We've got the Scottish Hospitals inquiry. There's all these things that, while they're really important, I think, they're hugely costly. They take so much time, and ultimately it's quite rare to get a sort of satisfactory conclusion, but yeah, I mean,
the difference with the COVID sorry, Douglas.
No, on you go, Anna, on you go.
I was just going to say, I think that the difference with the COVID inquiry is that I think what will come out of that, what everyone's hoping will come out of that, is not just a report that sits on a shelf, it's actually an action plan, because there will undoubtedly be another pandemic. I think that gives that a bit of kind of energy and impetus, whereas the Trams inquiry, it kind of felt, well, yeah, but it's happened, it's over, we spent all this money and now we know kind of what decisions were made when, but, I'm not convinced that there's a lot of really live lessons are going to be learned from that. And my worry about the ferry inquiry, a ferry inquiry might be that it would be something quite similar, that I that it wouldn't have a burning conclusion that would be of kind of live use.
Yeah.
I think the difference is I don't think we're going to stick another tram system in anywhere, but we're going to need to build, we're going to need to build more ferries. So it's important that we know. But listen, as you say, if they're just box ticking exercises, they're absolutely pointless. Perhaps we should just stop effing stuff up.
That would be nice.
That might help. That a much better way to do it would be some competent government, and then we can avoid public inquiries.
Yeah, well, I mean, that actually brings us on quite nicely to our next segment that I wanted to talk about. So obviously, not the weekend there, but the one before was the SNP conference, and we had a somewhat surprising announcement from Humza that the council tax was going to be frozen. And obviously, the fallout from that kind of was reported straight away. You had COSLA shouting about it, all sorts of people. But the issue doesn't seem to really be going away. And I think that, we're still continuing to see many public services complaining about the fact that they've got no funding. On Sunday, my colleague John Ferguson at the Sunday Mail had a story about the police union basically warning that they might not be able to protect us against things like terrorism and stuff because of the state of the force. We've got the fire brigades union, I think, on protesting because of pay. And we've also got more schools like due to close because of teachers voting for strike action. I mean, Anna, where do you think where does it end? I mean, what is the solution to it? Or do you think people are just going to have to accept, our services are just not going to be very good now?
Well, it puts councils in a really invidious position, doesn't it? Because they're the ones who are going to have to suck this up and make it work. Yes. And I mean, obviously, all the services are taking this golden moment while attention is on this subject to make this point that, they can't, they're stretched already. There's no more give in their system. I mean, the Fire Brigade Union were protesting out of FMQs before FMQs this morning, and that was Anna Sarwar's first attack line this morning was on that. So there's a lot of there's going to be a lot of political collateral damage in this decision. I mean, in the long term, this money has got to come from somewhere. And so that's what we have in the post. It's not going to be coming, if it's not going to be coming from our council tax, it's going to be coming from elsewhere, whether that's an increase in income tax or any other ancillary taxes they can rattle up any cash from. But, it's not going to come from nowhere. There was already a huge black hole in the budget, and this is only making it worse, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Dickie, I don't know what you think. Speaking to a few people since the council tax, specifically since that announcement, they were suggesting that the way that Humza Yousaf was wording it about kind of middle income people and how he's wanting to help middle income families, there was a suggestion that, have the SNP done some particular polling that shows that they need to go after this specific target audience, etc. Now, that could be very cynical, but I don't know what you think of that. Do you think that this was a sort of political ploy, or do you think it was a sort of genuine attempt to try and save people a bit of money?
No, I think it's a very populist decision. It's a political ploy. U-turn Yousaf is obviously seen some polling, or you can see the way the wind's blowing.
Is that have you just made that nickname up?
I've got it written here. Remember to say. But
I quite like that. U-turn.
Yep. U-turn Yousaf. So I think. Sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought. So he's. I think he has made this. This is a decision that he thinks is going to be a vote winner. He knows that ultimately, when councils need to cut services, the blame will probably end up falling on the council in many people's eyes in the court of public opinion, which is obviously so important. I think the proof of that is the fact that it appears to be completely uncosted. It was barely discussed beforehand. It wasn't part of his programme for government, and in fact, the Scottish Express has a story this week that suggests, although this is denied by the Scottish government, but apparently the permanent secretary wasn't very happy about a suggestion for this to go into the programme for government, and perhaps that's why he's had to wait to SNP conference to do it. It's clearly there. It was there to grab some headlines. It seems ill thought out. Ultimately, I think a lot of households will be breathing a sigh of relief because they're already under pressure. But it's also, there's suggestions that it's broke the Verity House agreement, obviously, with councils to work together. I don't know, perhaps Humza thinks they're too wee, too stupid, too poor to make their own decisions. They're always using that term, but I think it is a cynical ploy to buy votes, and I think it's already starting to bite them in the bum. You've seen Shona Robinson bumbling about it the other day in Holyrood. More of her later, obviously, but it just seems to me right now a First Minister who's desperate to try and turn the tide and is willing to do or say anything just to do it. And I think it'll be very, very interesting when we see the Scottish budget, which will be next month. So, December normally, the start of December. So, I mean, that's my take on it. A populist move from a guy who claims to hate populist politicians.
Interesting. Well, we'll see again. We'll see how that plays out. And as you say, we'll see what the budget has in store for us at the start of December. So I think, we're coming up to kind of towards the end of the show, and how could we go through an entire episode of Planet Holyrood this week and not mention that it's 1 week of Rishi, or one year. It's not been 1 week, 1 year of our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in power. And I mean, it's certainly been a less exciting year than when Boris Johnson was in charge, but I think that we all kind of needed probably a bit more boring politics. But, what do you guys think of Rishi's kind of first year? I mean, obviously, we've had a bit of turmoil in the Tories. We've had some people leaving. They've also gained the lovely Lisa Cameron from the SNP. But, I mean, I can't point to as many clangers for Rishi as I could have for Boris in his first year or so. But I don't know, that's just what I think. What do you guys think of his first year? Has it been a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Anna? Oh.
What, is that an equivocation? Are you
that?
not sure?
Undecided.
Okay.
I think
he's a floating voter.
Yeah. I think he's done okay in the situation that was handed to him by both his predecessors. Sometimes I forget Liz Truss was ever Prime Minister, to be honest. She was there for such a brief period, but she obviously had a massive impact in that period.
Aye, well, the shortest PM, but she just cocked it up, her and Kwasi Kwarteng.
But don't you think he benefits? Don't you think Sunak benefits from having followed such a line of, I mean, not benefits even, but I mean, he follows such a line of duds that I think that possibly makes him look slightly stronger than he is. And I think he still looks pretty weak. But, it would be hard not to be better than Liz Truss. I mean, that is not a high bar. Don't tank the economy. Hold steady. I still think he looks pretty thin. I mean, he might have gained an SNP floor crosser, but he has lost 3 spectacular by-elections. He's been really humped in 3 elections, and frankly, the response to that, the Conservative vote didn't come out, is a very, very weak last defence response to that. We heard that in Rutherglen. That was the SNP line in Rutherglen. So, they've repurposed that. I heard someone saying the other day that if anyone else wanted to be chairman of the Conservative Party, then Greg Hans would probably would have resigned over those two the two English ones, the Tamworth one and the Mid Bedfords one, you know, because he oversaw those elections and they were absolutely disastrous toilet flushing exercises for the Tories. But, you know, who wants to be the chairman of the Conservative Party? That's not a job that anyone's going to be rushing to want to do, is it?
No.
I'm not sure those were, in many ways, a verdict on Rishi Sunak. I think they were a verdict on, in some ways, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. I think Rishi Sunak inherited a complete bin fire.
You mean the by-election results?
Yeah, sorry, the by-election results. So, you know, I think what we've had is, like you say, Hannah, it's been a year of more boring politics, and I'm on record on this show saying I think that's why Keir Starmer's going to win the next election, because I think he's the most boring, you know, candidate to be Prime Minister. And I think people, I genuinely think people want that. They just want somebody who's seen as a kind of safe pair of hands. You know, you look at what Sunak's done. I mean, he's done some good stuff. There was you know, the Windsor framework has kind of calmed relations with the EU. He's made steps to try and you know, hold people to account for errors. You know, you look at Zahawi, who was obviously ousted because of his tax affairs. I mean, I've got no doubt under, you know, Boris Johnson, he would have survived that.
What about his 5 pledges? Are you impressed with his progress on his 5 pledges?
You need to remind me what they were.
I can do that. He was going to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce national debt, cut NHS waiting lists, and stop small boats.
Well, on the economy, obviously, he hasn't halved inflation, but is starting to stabilise. We've avoided a recession. But you know, we're kind of.
I mean, I'm still absolutely skint, guys. I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but I'm skint. Probably
Well, I mean,
more skint
every
than I have
time-
been in the past
Every
5
time I go
years.
shopping, I just moan incessantly about the price of everything. But you know, quite a lot of that was out of his hands. You know, it's something that
He
you
was the
inherit.
Chancellor.
Well,
Yes,
there is that
exactly.
argument, of course. You know, decisions he made while he was Chancellor maybe impacting on it. But in terms of the small boats, I think I read this morning that small boats have been cut in the last year. I don't kind of quote me on that, but again, it's probably not something that impacts on us too much. And obviously, the NHS hasn't been a success. So
It's
he's
interesting.
made some progress.
What are you giving him? Is that your 2.5 out of 5 kind of mark? Is that what the?
I'm giving him I don't know if B- is a bit too generous. A C, you know, it's a pass, but
He's crawled through.
must do, you know, could do better.
Yeah, I think it was interesting you're saying about how, you know, in terms of the NHS waiting list and stuff, obviously that's not really impacting Scotland, but I'm wondering just very briefly what you guys think has been his sort of impact in Scotland, because to be honest, the main thing that I've seen is just, I feel like Westminster's kind of bamming up the Scottish Parliament a bit more now than they have been before. I don't know if that's just me. It just feels like they're being a lot more antagonistic in the past year than normal. But I don't know if you guys think he's had any other impacts in Scotland specifically as Prime Minister.
I mean, I think he would struggle to find Scotland on a map. I mean, I think Scotland just isn't on his radar in any way whatsoever. I just don't get any impression that there's really anything that he's interested in here. I think probably the psephology is that Scotland's going to have a lot of Labour gains in the next general election. I think he's just, so what? That's the feeling I get.
Yeah.
I'm also not convinced that Rishi Sunak, who's being a bit more aggressive towards the Scottish government. I think Alistair Jack might be behind that, and I'm sure, speaking for the Express readers, not before time, but I mean, Rishi Sunak, his impact in Scotland, I think,
Negligible.
Hasn't been huge, but that's the situation we're in with devolution.
Well, I think that is all we've got time for this week. Just before we go, though, let's do our good week and bad week. Dickie, do you want to go first? Who have you got for good week?
For good week, fun enough, I've actually picked Rishi Sunak for lasting a year as Prime Minister. And just to quickly continue on, he has shown that he's willing to support the Scottish North Sea oil and gas industry. So there is one impact that he has had in Scotland, and a pretty significant one at that. I think he's probably had a better year than most people would have thought he would. And in the words of Winston Churchill, I think he needs to just keep buggering on for the next year. Govern for the country, not his party, which is something that I think he's better at than Boris Johnson.
Buggering on rather than buggering off.
Yeah. just keep buggering on. We're probably a year away from an election. He's got a year to try and turn the Tory fortunes around. I think that's a big ask, but I think he's done better than most would have thought when he came in. For bad week, I'll just go really quick on this one. I've went for Shona Robinson, who I think was shown up a bit this week when talking about the council tax freeze. I don't know if she's just incompetent or whether she's been sidelined, but I thought she looked completely out of her depth as Deputy First Minister, and it continues to baffle me that Humza Yousaf gave her the job in the first place.
Anna, what have you gone for?
Good week. I think Lord Brailsford did a good job chairing the COVID inquiry. I thought his tone was just right. He was very dignified. He started with a really, I thought, well-pitched commiseration to people who had lost people during the pandemic. It wasn't purple and over-egged and embarrassing. I thought he got the tone just right. Several of the people I spoke to said that they felt the way that the inquiry had been organised was very sympathetic towards them. And, that comes from the top, doesn't it? That kind of approach is top down. So I'm taking from that came from him, and so I think he's had a good week, and let's hope he can continue to do it that way. Bad week, I've picked Jenny Gilruth, the SNP Education Minister, a former teacher, and I think we just have in the post quite a horrible time coming up with more strikes, more school closures. Schools are still struggling to recover from COVID. There was figures out earlier this week that there's been a really big rise in school absences. There's 40% of secondary school students are missing one day of school a fortnight after COVID. There's long-term running problems with schools recovering from COVID. Then on top of it, they've got new strikes, Unison unwilling to accept a pay deal. So I think, Jenny, horrible week ahead.
Well, I think that is all we have time for this week, but thank you very much for joining us. And when Paul Hutchin stops getting his shiatsu seaweed,
that's it, his toenails have been buffed to high sheen. We'll have him back.
we can ask him to get them out in next week's podcast.
No,
we won't be having that. So yes, when Paul Hutchin comes out of his spa treatments, I'm sure that he'll be back hosting next week. But for now, thank you very much and see you later.
Cheers.
Bye.
It's important we look at the facts.
Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.